Greetings, brothers and sisters from around the world. Usually when I start a broadcast, I usually start with the Black Channel's song, or whatever you want to call it, but we don't have any time to waste on this. And tonight is, quite frankly, the single most important program that I've ever done. So, I don't want to waste any time. When I started doing this, I said years ago that they killed our fathers for doing less than we're doing today. With the Black Channel, with Intelligent Black Society, with reestablishing ourselves as African peoples. They killed our fathers for doing less. And unfortunately, as black people, rather than confronting the problem head on and dealing with it, we've had a bunch of people who have attempted to retreat behind a never-ending cascade of coping mechanisms, whereby which they attempt to pretend the problem simply doesn't exist. So they start attacking other black people who are calling out the problem. Well, all of a sudden, you are the problem. I've also stated that we as black people, that your single mother, bastard, baby, hood rat, slut, mammy culture, tell me what positive thing it has ever produced. Because if it produced scientists and our intelligentsia, I'd have no problem with it. But instead, it becomes a place where you cultivate the ignorant and the dumb. And black people, ignorance is our greatest enemy because our enemies know everything about us, while we celebrate and congratulate knowing nothing about them. August 2017, couple of months ago, we all remember the date of infamy. In Charlottesville, Virginia, white supremacists calling themselves the alt-right held their infamous Unite the Right rally, where white supremacists and white extremists of all stripes basically had a march and convention in the middle of the streets. And predictably, they came for war, and that was exactly what emerged. That's what we all knew. What we did not know until just a couple of days ago is that 9 days before the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, a little over a week before that, the FBI was handing out this information report. And this report confirms literally everything that I've ever said. Now you're going to hear it directly from the source. It confirms literally everything that I've ever said about us in relation to the government, about what they know, about what they've seen. It's not enough to have some jackass say they know and see everything. Everything is a metaphor. Can you tell us specifically what they know? Most people can't. This place did for years. And tonight, your nerds, your real ones, and your intelligentsia are going to do the necessary work for our survival This is a place that discusses these things on a level, at a microscopic, analytical level that simply no one else can, while literally everyone else is going to speak about it in vague generalities. We are going to speak about it in analytical specifics down the line. I'd like to thank our brother, Jason Reed, for posting this, getting the actual PDF of this file that you can actually read it, because foreignpolicy.com is the one who wrote the story, that they got a hold of this report. And 9 days before white supremacists would unleash murder and mayhem in the streets, the Donald Trump administration and his FBI were sitting around passing around a report saying that the threat to America was not white supremacists. They've invented a brand new term out of whole cloth. A term that nobody ever heard of before Foreign Policy printed this. Brand new term. We don't even know what it means. And when you read the report, it becomes very clear. They don't actually even know how to define it. But it's a bad thing. Black identity extremist. Now, they chose their terms carefully. Because you see, they would get laughed out of the room if they said black supremacist. Because then you would have to explain to people, what are black people supreme at? Other than avoiding white supremacy. Black people control nothing, we own nothing, we are at the bottom of the barrel of everything. What are we supreme over? So, no, you couldn't say that one. That'll get you laughed out of the room. Came up with a new one. You see, when you say white supremacy, you're saying that this person says, I'm supreme because I am white. I'm committing violence because I am supreme. And you are inferior, and that justifies my violence. Black identity extremists, what they're now trying to say is, well, if I say I'm black and identify as black, that justifies my extremism. That's what they're saying now, is that if you identify as black, then that's terrorism. That's what they're saying. So what they have done is say that basically any black person anywhere could be a terrorist now. Any black person anywhere. And when I read this report, you will see that it extends so far and its tendrils go out so wide in such a huge diameter that literally any black person anywhere could wind up being investigated, prosecuted, and jailed. This has gone way beyond it, but it precedes it way before now. What I'm going to do is something that no other person can, no other place can. They won't do that. Most of this is over their heads. No disrespect. But there's a reason that we have the Black channel, because it's the only place you can go into these things in depth. The title of this report is FBI Bureau of Investigation Intelligence Assessment. Now, first, I'm going to be stopping frequently through here so I can explain some of these things you're seeing. Intelligence assessment. Now, that's a term that you use for foreign entities. You don't use those types of terms for domestic entities. You use intelligence. Those are terms that you use in regard to Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the Russians. Not one person and not one thing mentioned in this assessment is foreign. Every single one of them is domestic. But they're letting you know, oh, as far as we're concerned, you're up there with Al-Qaeda. Now, ask if you compare to Al-Qaeda. What does Al-Qaeda do that we do? That's the question you have to ask. Where's the similarity? We're white, and we say so. So you are. Dated August 3rd, 2017. Title, UFOUO, Black Identity Extremists Likely Motivated to Target Law Enforcement Officers. Remember that word, likely. Remember it. Because in this assessment, you all are about to learn things about the FBI and their methodology that you didn't know before tonight. Don't try to lie and pretend you did. You're about to learn things tonight about their methodology that you simply never heard before, because we had never been told. But the words that they use in this report have meaning, right down to the word likely. Black identity extremists likely motivated to target law enforcement officers. And I want you to remember that word likely. Is it that important? Yes, it's that important. Unclassified / law enforcement sensitive. Executive summary, UFOUO. The FBI assesses it is very likely, and this one has likely with the number 2 next to it, which means it's annotated. FBI assesses it is very likely black identity extremists, parentheses, BIE, perceptions of police brutality against African Americans spurred by an increase in premeditated retaliatory lethal violence against law enforcement and will very likely serve as justification for such violence. Now, first of all, this is the new term, and in this report, it's capital B on black, capital I on identity, and capital E in extremist. So what they're basically doing is declaring that this is a new type of group, is what they're saying. They are declaring a new type of group. Right up there with the sovereign citizens and the Branch Davidians. They're declaring a new group, is what they're doing. By putting these letters in capitals on the initials, they're declaring a new group. They are officially declaring a new group with the acronym BIE. Now, before I go any further, because I don't want to lose this thought, you understand that these things were not chosen at random. A long time ago, they attempted to use the term black supremacists. As a matter of fact, the Southern Poverty Law Center still refers to Nation of Islam as black supremacists, for those of you who didn't know. Oh yeah, the SPLC. As far as they're concerned, the Nation of Islam is up there with the Ku Klux Klan and the Aryan Nation. Now, the SPLC cannot explain what the Nation of Islam is supreme over, but that's what they claim. But what this is saying is BIE. I want you to think about this for a moment. I held a conference in 2015 in Chicago. What was it called? BE1. In our circles, we use the phrase BE repeatedly. It stands for Black Empowerment. But now they're telling you that if you see BE, why? That means black extremist. The other thing is, what is the number 1 in the new Roman numerals? It's the letter I. The B-I-E. The B-1. E. B-1. Extremist. They want to make sure that when people see these acronyms, they're now going to try to steer this in a new direction. And they know you have to start planting seeds. So they're going to start planting seeds now. That's what they're going for. The report goes on to say The FBI assess it is very likely this increase began following the August 9th, 2014 shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, and the subsequent grand jury November 2014 declination, that means declining, refusing, to indict the police officers involved. And there was only one police officer indicted as far as I'm aware, but this is the FBI. This is the FBI now. The FBI assesses it is very likely incidents of alleged police abuse against African Americans since then have continued to feed the resurgence in ideologically motivated violent criminal activity within the BIE movement. So now, as I told you, they're officially declaring that this is a movement that no one's heard of before now. No one has seen before now. No one has had a thought of or a conversation about before now. But they're declaring to the already established bigot, they're declaring, oh yeah, man, black identity. I mean, if you identify as a race, isn't that extremism? Now, the other thing is they are going to continue to use these terms throughout this report. When speaking about police violence, not one time do they acknowledge a single incident of police violence. Not a single time. Not even one. Not even one. Notice it says it is very likely incidents of alleged police abuse. When they talk about the police, everything is alleged, perceived. But when they talk about black people, it is not alleged violence. Now, when they're talking about you, it's not alleged. With the police, anything you have a problem with, well, that's just your perception. That's just what you allege. But when it's us, it is, well, this is violence. This is premeditated violence. But yes, with the police, that's just what you think. Well, no, for you, no, it's not what we think. We don't think this, we know it. You're violent. No, what the police do, that's just your perception. Oh, but what you're doing, no, that's not our perception. This is the truth. You're just violent. This is violence. With the police, you have the perception that there is police abuse. Yeah, it's abuse. There is no police violence. Even if you were right, it's not violence, it's abuse. Even if you were correct that something wrong has happened, it's not violence, it's just abuse. That's the worst it is. It's just abuse. This is the predisposition that the FBI takes when dealing with black people. No wonder you can't get a civil rights indictment. And yes, Barack Obama also factors into this report. They specifically mention it. But you're hearing right now the attitude of the federal government and why you can't get a civil rights indictment on George Zimmerman, Michael Dunn. Yeah, we're going down the list. You can't get a civil rights indictment on any of them. Michael Slager, can't get one. You couldn't get it under Obama. You can't get it under Trump. So don't say it was just Donald Trump. You couldn't get it under Obama. You can't get it under Trump. Because any act of violence committed against black people is determined to be alleged, perceived, your opinion. But whatever they claim you feel about police, that's not an opinion. Oh, that's already a fact. There's no debate. Now, listen to this next part, because this is where they reference us. The FBI assesses it is very likely, and remember these terms, likely and very likely, some BIEs are influenced by a mix of anti-authoritarian, Moorish sovereign citizen ideology, and BIE ideology. There you go. Now that is everybody who is against white supremacy. That was everyone. For those of you who don't know what the term anti-authoritarian means, who's the authority? White supremacists. So by definition, every single one of us that is against white supremacy, they have now declared you are an extremist because you are against the authority. You're against the Michael Slagers. You're against the Darren Wilsons. You're against the killers on the Baton Rouge Police Department. You're against that. You're an extremist. You're a terrorist. Because you're against that. Now notice, not one time in this report do they attempt to say that the police were in the right. At no time do they ever say that. But they do acknowledge that if you have a problem with the police, you're in the wrong. And if you see black people being murdered, you're in the wrong. Now, they don't ever say the police were right, but if you're against abuse, you're wrong. And now they've sat here and told you, anti-authoritarian, that's all of us. Moorish sovereign citizen. Have you ever heard of a government document that has acknowledged black people as Moors? Can someone name for me the last government document, government conference, government entity that formally acknowledges black people as Moors? I'll wait for that one. Show me any document anywhere that has ever acknowledged that before now. Before reading this assessment, when did you see that? And then BIE ideology. So it says that they're likely the BIEs are influenced by authoritarian, Moorish sovereign citizen, and BIE ideology. Well, who out there identifies themselves as BIE? No one identifies themselves as BIE. They only identify themselves as black empowerment and black identity. So you can't say that black identity extremists are also influenced by BIE ideology as if they're separate things. No one is a BIE ideology adherent before you mention this report. So you're talking about someone else. You can't be talking about the BIEs since you said the BIEs are influenced by these other things. So they're talking about something else when they say BIE. Yeah, they're talking in a schizophrenic way, but they want you to know the problem is BIE extremists are influenced by anybody who promotes black identity. That's who. So the BIE extremists are being motivated by black identity people. Now, the next sentence. The FBI has high confidence in these assessments based on a history of violent incidents attributed to individuals who acted on behalf of their ideological beliefs, documented in FBI investigations and other law enforcement and open source reporting. The FBI makes this judgment with the key assumption the recent incidents are ideologically motivated. Now, it said recent. 2014 is recent? Okay. Now, here's the part that other people will not go into because they cannot, their eyes glaze over. But the Black Channel makes sure that you are fully informed. This is the annotations at the bottom of this first page to the terms that they used on this first page. These are the annotations. I'm going to go straight to the ones that matter. Remember that when I said likely and most likely, we'll get to that later. The second one is the FBI. The FBI defines black identity extremists as individuals who seek, wholly or in part, through unlawful acts of force or violence in response to perceived racism and injustice in American society, and some do so in furtherance of establishing a separate black homeland or autonomous black social institutions, communities, or governing organizations within the United States. This desire for physical or psychological separation is typically based on either a religious or political belief system, which is sometimes formed around or includes a belief in racial superiority or supremacy. The mere advocacy of political or social positions, political activism, use of strong rhetoric, or generalized philosophic embrace of violent tactics may not constitute extremism and may be constitutionally protected. Brothers and sisters, they got all of us in that one. That's all of us. That is every single person listening to me. That was all of us. It doesn't matter if you're Nation of Islam, Moorish Temple, the Sultans down there on 125th Street. It doesn't matter who you are. This is every single one of us. Did you get that one? This is all of us. The FBI defines black identity extremists as individuals who seek wholly or in part through unlawful acts of force or violence in response to perceived racism and injustice in American society. How many of us do not see racism and injustice in American society? How many of us don't see that? How many? They're saying that if you perceive racism and injustice in American society, we're talking about you. Quote, and some do so in furtherance of establishing a separate black homeland or autonomous black social institutions, communities, or governing organizations within the United States. People, do you understand what that sentence meant? A separate black homeland. Well, that's Africa. Now, some of you may, well, no, some of the cowardly niggas are going to jump up. No, they talking about if you want to, like, take over Atlanta or something. What does the phrase take over mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? No, they're talking about anywhere. A separate black homeland. That's anywhere. Or autonomous black social institutions. Yeah, I want some autonomous black social institutions like our own financial institutions. We need our own banks. We need our own co-ops. We need our own educational infrastructures like the Jews have and like the Mormons have and like the Arabs have. Hell yeah, I want some autonomous black institutions. And the FBI just said, well, that's terrorism. So for these other people, that's not terrorism. The Mormons moving to Utah and declaring a Mormon state, and Harry Reid and Mitt Romney and a bunch of other politicians currently sitting in office, those white men are not terrorists for being part of a separate Mormon social government and institution inside America. But you and me, we're the terrorists. Those guys aren't, but we're the terrorists. Chinatown is not terrorism, but black people saying we want our own independent social institutions, that has been officially declared terrorism by the FBI. They're no longer hiding it now. If you don't want to shop at white-owned stores, if you want to have your own banks and your own schools and your own social institutions and your own universities, then you are a terrorist. This report just said it. I'll read it again if you missed it. That people who do so in furtherance of establishing a separate black homeland or autonomous black social institutions, communities, or governing organizations within the United States. So when Dr. Claude Anderson talks about having a black city council or a black commission, they're telling you now that a black city council is determined to be terrorism. You're an extremist if you talk about having a black city council. Having your own black city government is now officially declared terrorism and extremism by the FBI. No wonder the state of Michigan passed their emergency finance manager law, and 9 of the 11 cities that they took over were black. Even though black people are a minority of Michigan's population, they passed the emergency finance manager law and then started taking over the black cities. Because a majority black government is considered to be an extremist and terrorist entity. And now the FBI is confirming it. No wonder they make so many moves. No wonder they ran Dr. Anderson out of Detroit on a rail. Oh yeah, and it didn't help you, did it, Kwame Kilpatrick? You played their game, you danced to their tune, you did their bidding, and they put you in prison forever anyway. How well did that work out for you, Kwame? Turning on your people in favor of those guys. How well did it work out for you, Kwame? Now, the next sentence, the desire for physical or psychological separation is typically based on either a religious or political belief system. So you and I saying we want separation from injustice, that's not called common sense or survival. It's, well, this is a religion or a political stunt. This is just politics. It isn't survival. Because you see, if they say it's survival, then you have to acknowledge, well, what are they trying to survive? Now, they're letting you know, yeah, you're being brutalized, but we're going to try to say your motives are something else. And then it adds this part, is based on either a religious or political belief system, which is sometimes formed around or includes a belief in racial superiority or supremacy. Please name for me one group of folk who are saying they want to separate from American society because they see themselves as supreme. Show me one group of people in black society who's declaring that. Show it to me. I'll wait. I'll wait. I'm going to skip over this next addendum because it talks about sovereign citizens. But going on to the next page. This intelligence assessment focuses on individuals with BIE ideological motivations who have committed targeted, premeditated attacks against law enforcement officers since 2014. So, with the police, they can't give you any stats. Now, you all do know that, don't you? The federal government does not actually keep stats on police murders of black people. Of police murders, period. They don't keep any statistics at all. They've got recommendations. They've got records on every citizen arrested for a crime. They don't keep any records at all on police violence against black people. But they do keep records of anything that they say, that they claim is an action against police. Now they're on top of it. And you're about to hear in this report all kinds of things. This assessment does not address BIEs who have attacked law enforcement officers during the course of officers' routine duties, such as responding to calls and traffic stops in which violent actions were reactionary in nature. This assessment addresses the following key intelligence questions. 1. To what extent are BIEs targeting interests retaliatory? And 2. What cross-programmatic relationships influence the BIE movement? ULES. This assessment is the first FBI analytic intelligence product to assess influences between the sovereign citizen extremist movement and the black identity extremist movement. Now, what is this telling you is this is the first FBI assessment that is looking at connecting the dots or claiming, should we say that this is claiming, because I don't believe for a second that this was leaked accidentally. I think this was leaked deliberately because they want white society to have a talking point to say, see, anybody who is against white supremacy and white violence against black people, well, you're the same as the Aryan Nation. Well, we can't be the same as Aryan Nation. Why not? Because we're not marching down the streets attacking people. Doesn't matter. If you feel a certain way, we'll just say that that's black supremacy. So this has been leaked so that white people can say, see, these people are just like you. Only bad. It goes on to say the FBI has previously reported on BIE retaliatory violence against law enforcement in 2 products. So that means that there were 2 previous reports before now supposedly saying that there were BIEs, black identity extremists, both of which had findings consistent with this assessment. Now listen to the next sentence, people, because this shows how dumb a lot of you are. The March 23rd, 2016 FBI intelligence bulletin titled UFOUO Black Separatist Extremists Call for Retaliation in Response to Police-Involved Incidents Could Incite Acts of Violence Against Law Enforcement. March 23rd, 2016. Who was president in March of 2016? Before you sit up here and say, yeah, that's right, that old racist Trump, he the one doing this. That's Donald Trump. Who was president in they said that they had 2 previous reports, which means that they had already started saying that black identity extremists is something we need to look at. 2 previous reports before now. 2016, Donald Trump wasn't in the FBI. That wasn't Donald Trump's FBI. That was Obama's. That was Obama's. And by the way, 2016 is not the first time they watched it. Yeah. I definitely believe that this report was leaked. So that if we tried to say it's Trump, he lets you know, oh, no. See, this was Obama. This isn't racially motivated. This was Obama who did it. James Comey got booed out of Howard. Now you know why. I guess he was trying to test if we remember or not, or if we know. Yeah, we know. Yeah, we know. (2016), but it doesn't stop there. The March 23rd, 2016 FBI intelligence bulletin assessed incidents involving allegations. Notice they never say involving law enforcement abuse. Everything is allegations. Everything. Not one time do they acknowledge that police have ever committed an act of violence against black people. Every single thing is allegations. You allege, you perceive, you think, you claim. But not one of the offenses against black people is confirmed or labeled real. Now, anything they say happened to police, that's real. But not one time do they acknowledge anything has actually even happened to us. They're claiming nothing's happened. This is just all in your head, nigga. They assessed the incidents involving allegations of law enforcement abuse and related legal proceedings would likely lead to BSE calls for violent retaliation and incite these domestic extremists to commit violent acts against law enforcement. Now, in 2016, did you hear what they called it? Black separatist extremists. So Barack Obama, the magic mulatto, who spent his entire life despising black people, which is why Tom Daschle knew that this was their man to push for the White House, because he hates black people as much as Tom Daschle and Donald Trump do. No wonder he gets along with every racist you can name just fine. He doesn't get along with black people that well. Barack Obama hates black people as much as white supremacists do. And he called it black separatists. Trump's FBI has come back and said, we got to redo this propaganda. Black separatists is a little too vague. We need something with some more teeth in it. Goes on to say the November 14th, 2014 intelligence bulletin. Yeah, we're in 2017, but they released one in 2016 and released one in 2014. That means that they were watching all of this as soon as the Ferguson uprising happened. They were watching it and on top of it as soon as the Ferguson uprising occurred. Because remember, November 2014, that's when they let Darren Wilson go. And the FBI released an intelligence assessment then titled Potential Criminal Reactions to Missouri Grand Jury Announcement. So before they go any further, it's potential criminal reactions. 2014. Who was president of the United States in 2014, people? And I ask you, have you ever heard Rachel Maddow or any of these other so-called good white liberals who have access to a whole lot more information than we do, or that foreignpolicy.com does? Have any of them ever mentioned this assessment before you all heard that, by the way, there was an FBI assessment in 2014 while you were in the streets in Ferguson, but telling Barack Obama that we need to indict Darren Wilson? His FBI was saying that you were potentially going to have a criminal reaction to the verdict. Not that the FBI tactics to indict suspected white supremacist elements in law enforcement, we're still waiting for that FBI assessment. But they got one that says black folks are criminal if they don't like a jury verdict. This was while you were in the streets, while the jury was reading the verdict. They were already saying, now here's what we gonna do about these niggas. We're already sizing you up. The November 2014 assessment assessed the announcement of the grand jury's decision in the shooting death of Michael Brown in Ferguson would likely be exploited by some individuals to justify threats and attacks against law enforcement and critical infrastructure. Next page. There was an addendum on that one, but I'm skipping over that. Next page. UFOUO, suspects' grievances very likely lead to violent targeting of law enforcement. The FBI judges it is very likely, BIE perceptions of police brutality against African Americans, have become organizing drivers for the BIE movement since 2014, resulting in a spike of BIEs intentionally targeting law enforcement with violence. In all 6 targeted attacks since 2014, the FBI assesses it is very likely the BIE suspects acted in retaliation for perceived past police brutality incidents. Even though 5 of these attacks occurred following controversial police shootings of African Americans by white police officers, BIE targeting of officers was not in every incident based on their specific race. Now, people, what they're about to do next, this next part, they go in detail. In this next part, they go step by step, incident by incident. Now, you know what you think about incidents involving police officers where they claim black people shot them. There's no proof whatsoever, by the way. No proof at all. but they claim it happened. They perceive that there were killings of police officers. They perceive it. They claim it, they think it. But we don't have any proof. You know what you think about them. Now, listen to what they have to say. And by the way, they list the incidents. By the way, they list it. I want you to hear what they think. Now, this report says, on July 7th, 2016, Micah Johnson ambushed and shot 11 law enforcement officers. Wait a minute, don't you mean allegedly? He allegedly, Micah Johnson allegedly, we perceived that Michael Johnson allegedly attacked. Now it says ambushed. Micah Johnson ambushed and shot. Whoa, once you say somebody shot somebody, isn't it enough? Once you say he ambushed him, isn't it enough? Why didn't you just say Micah Johnson allegedly? What happened to the word allegedly all of a sudden? Because you have no proof. So what happened to the word allegedly? Why isn't it alleged anymore? Like I said, when they get to talking about us, ain't gonna be no mental health, ain't gonna be no we think, ain't gonna be no we allege. It is, oh nigga, you did it. For the police, well, you allege it. For them, you guilty. Micah Johnson was never tried. So anything you say about him is alleged. He was never tried. You never gave him the opportunity to be. He was alleged. It's alleged that Micah Johnson ambushed and shot 11 law enforcement officers, killing 5 in downtown Dallas, Texas, during a First Amendment protected protest before being ultimately killed by police. You know, with their flying robot gun. Remember, they used military hardware against Micah Johnson in violation of posse comitatus, by the way. Sheer violation. They used military weaponry against him. Sheer violation. And that's not alleged. It goes on to say the 5 deceased officers were white. The planned public event was protesting recent officer-involved shootings of African Americans in Louisiana and Minnesota. Based on Johnson's journal writings and statements to police, he appeared to have been influenced by BIE ideology. Now, folks, did you hear this? The 5 deceased police officers were white. Are they going to say anything about Lauren Aaron? Remember, he was the white cop in Dallas who had white supremacist tattoos. Remember? Now, this report never mentions Lauren Aaron even once. Why didn't it even say Micah Johnson allegedly killed 5 police officers, including 1 with suspected white supremacist ties and who had white supremacist tattoos and markings? Why didn't they say that he had white supremacist iconography tattooed on himself? He had white supremacist symbols. Why didn't they say that? Micah Johnson killed 5 police officers, including 1 who had white supremacist tattoo symbols. Wouldn't that have been a complete and thorough report of what happened in Dallas? Oh yeah, because if you say that, then Micah Johnson doesn't seem like an extremist anymore. Because you see, you're only an extremist if the threat isn't real. You're not an extremist if you proved that the threat was real. Micah Johnson proved that at least 20% of the Dallas Police Department is confirmed white supremacist and half of it is potential. Because you could pick any 5 police officers at random and they will be white supremacists. He proved that. In a very unfortunate real world exercise, he allegedly proved it. That you could pick any 5 white police officers at random and you will get an overt white supremacist. But the FBI report does not mention this. Now, listen to what they say next. This is their note on Micah Johnson. During the standoff, and tell me if any of you heard of any of this before now. During the standoff with police, Johnson told police negotiators, so he was in communication with police, now we find out. He told police negotiators he was upset about recent police shootings and white people and expressed a desire to kill white people, especially white officers. Johnson searched and liked social media pages of F.B.I and black separatist groups and had been ousted from a local F.B.I group for being too radical, according to an open source news article. Now, folks, first of all, we don't have any proof of this whatsoever. This is what they say. They say that Micah Johnson had a problem with police and white people. We don't have any independent confirmation whatsoever that he ever spoke to the police that night. All you got is them saying, take our word for it. We talked to him and he said he was after the police and white folks. So this is the crazy nigga with a gun story. That's what this is. Crazy nigga with a gun. Now, they go on to say black identity, F.B.I groups, and black separatist groups. They don't name them, but F.B.I groups. In other words, anybody we name. What is a F.B.I group? Anybody we say is. Because as you saw before, they make the definition so broad and ambiguous that literally anybody would qualify. Anybody. Next, now this is one many of you may have forgotten about. On October 23rd, 2014, Zale H. Thompson attacked 4 white New York Police Department officers in Queens with a hatchet. One officer received injuries to the arm and the second officer received an injury to the side of the head. The 2 remaining NYPD officers at the scene shot and killed Thompson, according to open source reporting. Now, listen to this next part, because I remember this incident, but they didn't say anything about this guy after it. It didn't make any headlines. They buried this story after this. And this next part, you're about to hear things, many of you are about to hear stuff about this from the first time. If you remember that hatchet incident, much of this you're going to hear for the first time. The story says, their assessment says, according to open source reporting, Thompson was angered after, quote, a recent spate of deaths at the hands of police, end quote. In his own writings, Thompson advocated for armed struggle against, quote, the oppressors and mass revolt against the U.S. social, economic, and political systems which he perceived to be, quote, white dominated. Now, do you hear that? It just said the American social order that he perceived to be white dominated. Okay, is there anybody here saying that the American government, American banking, and American schools are not white dominated? Do you know how crazy and out of your mind you have to be to sit up here and say that 5 + 5 = 10, but that's just your perception? 99% of the United States government is white, but the F.B.I says it's only your perception that American society is white dominated. This is how far these bastards are going, that in their legal documents, they will not even acknowledge mathematics. They're gonna sit here and play stupid on everything. Everything. Who in the world can argue that the U.S. social, economic, and political systems are white dominated? Who can argue against that? Who in the world can argue against it? Apparently, the FBI says, well, I mean, that's your perception, but that's not a fact, though. I mean, you perceive it that way, but that's not a fact. It's not a demonstrable empirical fact. That's your perception that the media and the schools and the banks and the government and law enforcement and everything else, that's your perception that they are white dominated. Your perception. You just think it. Now you all know why you cannot get your discrimination lawsuits, police indicted. Now you know why you can't get it. This is the position of the United States government. And it's not new. It's not new. It goes on to say he also described the United States as a, quote, beast, and called for chopping off its head, hands, and feet. Now, there's a reason that they included this phrase, beast. We all remember KRS-One when he made that song. Whoop, whoop, that's the sound of the police. Whoop, whoop, that's the sound of the beast. And folk have been using it ever since. They're the beast. So now what they're doing is they're officially acknowledging that the pronouns and metaphors that you use for white supremacy, they are now trying to put this into the American lexicon at large, so that when you say the beast, why, you're an extremist, because you claim that it's the beast. Yeah, that's that black identity down there in Alabama. Yeah, that's that black identity extremist talk there. I knows that there's talk. That's that black identity extremist. I read that from the F.B.I. once. Those people like to talk about they the beast. They talk about all Americans is beasts. I ain't got no damn tail. I ain't no livestock. I ain't no beast. Hand me my damn Confederate flag, Martha. I'm going to the NASCAR. It goes on to say NYPD observed tattoos on Thompson's body that indicated he was affiliated with a black separatist extremist group, and pocket litter indicating he may have been associated with another black separatist group, according to law enforcement reporting. Now, where that's concerned, I'm trying to check on that. Sources, law enforcement reporting. So they don't, in this assessment, they don't actually state or prove it. They're just saying, well, take it from us. According to law enforcement, he had tattoos that indicated to us that he was a member of a black extremist group, of a separatist extremist group. He had tattoos that identified him. Take our word for it. The next thing here says, convergence of BIE and Moorish sovereign citizen ideology very likely leads to violence against law enforcement officers. The FBI assesses it is very likely a few of the BIEs who have targeted law enforcement since 2014 were influenced by more than one ideological perspective. The FBI judges it is very likely in 4 of the 6 BIE attacks against law enforcement since 2014, the perpetrators were motivated by a mix of BIE ideology and Moorish sovereign citizen extremist ideology, a category of SCE, that's sovereign citizen extremist ideology. The FBI assesses it is very likely BIE adoption of a Moorish SCE, sovereign citizen extremist identity reinforced a sense of disenfranchisement from society and a perception that the criminal justice system is unjust. That somebody at the FBI could have said that, could have typed that last sentence with a straight face is simply a marvel. It is simply a marvel that anybody could have made that last sentence with a straight face. That is simply a marvel that that could have been done. That you would sit here and say it's a perception that the criminal justice system is unjust. The Justice Department releases reports every damn year proving it. But the FBI says it's your perception. They couldn't even say disenfranchisement from society and inequities in the criminal justice system. They will not acknowledge in any form, way, shape, or manner, and this goes back to Barack Obama, they would not acknowledge in any way, form, shape, or manner that there is any type of injustice in the American courts. None whatsoever. That if the court says it, it is right. It is always right. It is always correct, unless it's O.J. Simpson. Now, if it's O.J., it's wrong. And we need a mulligan. So if it's O.J. Simpson, that's wrong. But for the rest of you, it's right. We're right. Except if one of you gets off, then it's wrong. Then the system is broken. Might not be unjust, but it's broken. But the system otherwise is perfect. Zero mistakes. Never been a wrong verdict of any kind. Never been. Don't worry about those videos we got over there. Don't worry about that. If the judge says that's not what happened, then your video is just your perception. You know, you perceived that Michael Slager gunned down Walter Scott in the back as he ran. No weapons, no threat. You perceived it. You perceived it. It's your perception that Patrick Harmon was shot in the back and murdered on police body cam. They got this one on body cam. He ran, he had no weapons. He was clearly running, and the police, after he got 10 feet away or so, he was running, they were running after him, and one of the cops just opened fire, shot him in the back, dead. But that's not really what happened. That's just your perception that that's what happened. You see, what really happened was, as he was running, the police officer fired his gun, but the guns were taken over by alien entities who swung the bullets around, and they went in their own trajectory, and they just happened to go straight into the back of Patrick Harmon. So do you all realize they are saying that there is no act of violence against black people that is actually acknowledged as an act of violence? Anything that happens to us is simply your perception. And the courts are proving that it's just your opinion, but it's not a fact. It gives notes on October 4th and October 13th of 2016, an individual allegedly shot at 2 different police stations in Indianapolis, Indiana. The subject left a handwritten note at the scene of one of the shootings in which he identified himself as a Moor and made anti-white statements. The subject posted pictures on social media of African-American men carrying assault rifles behind text calling for social injustice and retribution. Okay, that doesn't seem quite right there. They must have meant to say that you meant to say calling out social injustice. The subject was later involved in a shootout with police during his arrest on related charges, according to law enforcement reporting. On July 17, 2016, Gavin Eugene Long ambushed and shot 6 law enforcement officers in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, allegedly, before eventually being killed by police. The deceased victims included 1 African-American officer and 1 white officer from the Baton Rouge Police Department. and one white officer from the East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office. Long had expressed black separatist rhetoric both on social media and in his manifesto, including rants against, quote, crackers, and reference to an African-American male killed by police in Baton Rouge on July 5th, 2016. In his manifesto, Long expressed his frustrations with the police and criminal justice system in the United States and saw his actions, quote, as a necessary evil in order to create substantial change. A law enforcement search of Long's laptop contained biographical information and residential addresses of 2 officers involved in the Alton Sterling shooting. There were only 2 officers involved. You see how this I'm breaking in here. Do you see how this assessment keeps trying to make it seem like there were way more people at the scene than there were? They know that Darren Wilson was the only person involved with, well, beyond the police department when they colluded later. But he was the only one there. There were only 2 officers who murdered Alton Sterling. But they're trying to make it seem like there were even more. No, there were only 2. And the media, has the media ever identified who those officers were, by the way? Have any of you ever seen a news article that identified who those 2 officers are? Because we've never heard anything else after it. They murdered Alton Sterling and nothing. Has anybody seen them identify who the killers were? Just asking. A law enforcement search of Long's laptop contained biographical information and residential addresses of 2 officers involved in the Alton Sterling shooting, and Google search directions to one of the officers' home addresses. Long had also declared himself to be a Moor, had changed his, quote, slave name to the Moorish name Cosmo Asar Sedapinra, and was carrying a Moorish identification card at the time of his death, according to open source reporting. They say time of his death. Don't you mean the time of his killing? They might not say murder. Why didn't they say the time of his killing? So the police are ambushed and shot. Gavin Long is just killed. He's just dead. He's not even killed. He's just dead. He's just walking along. Police showed up. He just dropped dead. Oh, amazing. Crazy how that works. Crazy. Now, did you notice what they said there also? Said that Long had declared himself to be a Moor. Now, why would you include this in this report? What's wrong with being a Moor? What's wrong with that? What they're telling you is, I mean, this is off by itself. That Long also declared himself to be a Moor and was carrying a Moorish identification card at the time of his death. So what they're saying in no uncertain terms is that if you identify yourself as a Moor, the FBI regards you as a terrorist. At first they were saying it had to be linked to an actual crime. Now they're saying that no. Just say, if you identify as a Moor, that's a trigger. That's a flag. Soon as you say you're a Moor, that's a flag. And they're letting you know this is not new. Every time that because if you say that you're a Moor, or if you say that you're an African, by definition, you are saying that I am psychologically migrating away from white dominance and control. You are now an open threat. This is one of the defective Negroes. He's fighting the programming. He's not going along with it. He's not going to get up every morning and be content to let the status quo remain the status quo. Soon as you say those types of things that say that you identify yourself as something other than what the American social order has determined you are to be, a good little nigger, once you declare that, they're letting you know now, any of us who openly declare that we're not a part of what they're doing, you're a threat. So in case before you were under the misconception that when they use those terms that they had to be linked to a violent act, this last part here lets you know, oh no, he said he was a Moor. That has nothing to do with what he did. He said he was a Moor. He said he had a Moorish identification card. And that's the problem. That's the problem. These aren't my words. These are theirs. On September 13, 2016, an individual reported